Welcome back. Thanks so much for joining me. So, this episode is going to be part two in a topic I've been reflecting on quite a bit lately. And part one was on these two opposing sides, as I see them as two opposing sides, as when we're seeking to control the world, including our world, versus when we're seeking to understand it. So really, it's a conversation of, is our habit patterns, ways of being, actions, a body, speech, mind, of trying to control the world, are they working for us and others or not? Are they helping or not? Are they serving in a compassionate way or not? So in part one, which if you haven't heard yet, I recommend going back to watch or listen to it. I more discussed sort of the difference between these two. I laid out the case for why I think it's much more valuable to pursue seeking and understanding versus a control or fix or solution. And in part two, which I promised, which is here, I thought to discuss some practices. So if you find my reflection helpful on this point of view that seeking an understanding of ourselves in the world is actually more useful than, or more helpful than control or dominion over our world. If you think that's a more helpful perspective, this part two, this video, this episode here, is going to be all about various practices, ways of implementation that I use usually on a daily basis to foster that habit, to foster a habit of seeking understanding. So so this assumes you, I guess, agree with my premise here. And again, like I said in part one, you don't have to agree with me. You can completely disagree. And if you agree or disagree, you're welcome to comment if you're watching on YouTube. I don't really particularly want to argue with you, but I'm open to hearing other ideas or thoughts or things that I'm open to hearing disagreement all the time, anytime. So you're always welcome to disagree. But again, this part two assumes you agree and you want to hear some more practices, or at least you think there's some merit to that idea. And so the first one, as I pointed out in part one, I would guess the first practical step, the first practice, is to use mindful awareness, to use your mindfulness practice to just become more aware throughout the day when you're entering habits of control, fixing. I call them like more solution-based mentalities, right? Where we're seeking to solve rather than be curious or open. And again, it's not that we should never seek a solution. There's certain things it's really important to seek a solution for. For instance, if we're having a medical issue and, we seek a solution through, medical help, this is important, right? So it's not saying never seek solution. I'm just more talking about the mentality that only finds safety in solution. Just an example of this, I often find my mind when it's more anxious, my body when it's more anxious, I'm like seeking solution constantly for things that actually don't need a solution, right? And that's when I know that's that kind of control, solving, fixing mentality, right? And control is a strong word. We also might not like to see ourselves in an aspect of controlling. I mean, it's a pretty big insult someone can hurl when they say you're a controlling person or something like that. So again, maybe we can take the stigma away a little bit and just see it as a habit pattern that wishes to sort of narrow things down and find some kind of like, I don't know how you say, I think fix is a better word here, right? It's a little softer. Try to fix something all the time. And again, it's not that we shouldn't fix things. It's that when that mentality is happening all the time, including to things that don't need to necessarily be fixed in the moment, that's maybe a pattern to look at. And again, we might all be experiencing, maybe some of you don't experience that, and maybe for those of you who do, maybe there's different variants of that. For me, it often comes with anxiety. It's like the more anxiety I'm feeling in a moment, there's more this sort of push to oh, a little water spilled, got to clean that up. Kind of that kind of mentality. But again, that might just be me. I don't know. So anyways, I may just be talking to myself at the end of the day, which is highly likely. But if some of you can relate, that's why I make this content. I'm sure I'm not alone out there, though I might be. So anyways, so I think the first practical step is just making this distinction between, or I should say awareness, mindfulness of when we're entering that fix-it mode, that anxious fix-it mode, and then noticing that and releasing that. And we actually have something to do here. We have a practical step, which is, okay, what do I need to understand here? What can I seek to understand? And this is, I think, where I actually really enjoy this. I mean, it's not comfortable all the time, but there's a real vibrancy here for me that I hope you can find as well. There's like life here for me personally. And what I mean by that is when I notice that pattern, then there can be this sense of, in order to understand something, and I'm not saying understand it to fix it, understand it to have a deeper experience of its truths. You know, what's around it, what's happening. But what I notice, of course, you know, sometimes, often when I have a little bit more understanding around an emotion, a behavior pattern I have, a thinking pattern, something going on in a relationship I have with someone else, my relationship to a news article. It really could be anything from something very internal to a mix of internal and external. But either way, whatever that is, when I seek to understand it and when a little bit of insight comes around it, usually there's a release that happens, meaning there's, you know, I didn't need to necessarily find like what I believed or what I felt or what's right, what's wrong, you know, absolute, what's right, getting into the black and whites of it, extremes. What I find is actually in that malleability of something, in the openness of it, there's more ease. I can usually drop it, especially if it's something internal. You know, if it's something internal, it doesn't involve someone else necessarily. There's more space. And that's such a rewarding result of this kind of work for me personally. And I hope it can, be for you, obviously, if you want to work on it. But it also can really help with our experience of compassion, right? And so that's the first step. Work with noticing when the mind narrows around something, gets very black and white, right and wrong, fix, solve, control. Open it up with questions. So this is kind of the second practical step. Sometimes how we can shift into seeking to understand is asking open questions. For me, for some people, they experience, like very specific open questions are the most helpful, like making it very specific about that topic. So I'll use this example of like spilling the water in the kitchen or whatever, all over the floor. And there's like, there might be the question of like, does the water I mean, it sounds silly, but I might ask myself, does the water belong there? Does it need to be cleaned up right now? What's going to happen if it's not cleaned up? All these kinds of questions I'll ask, right? But for me, normally, so again, for some people, those kinds of more specific questions might work. But for me, I actually just sort of like, at this point, open questions aren't so specific. They're more just sort of, what is that kind of questions? What is this? It's more just like a general question of like, what's happening here? And then through mindful awareness, giving a moment to feel the feelings in my body, the emotions, to recognize the thought patterns, to notice the environment around me, what's happening physically, what's happening in relationship to other people in the space, all of that. And just giving like some room to take it in. I think there's a famous I don't know if it's Bob Marley or this famous lyric of like, life is for living, something like that. It might be Bob Marley. Anyways, that just popped into my head because it's sort of like, that's what it feels like. Life is for living. And when we're constantly remedying, controlling, we're not living. And so I noticed in that space when I just asked the question, like, what's this all about? What's happening here? And then I look, I live life, even if I decide to clean up the water, I learned something. Right? So I think that's the main steps in the beginning. Noticing when we're narrowing around something, then doing its opposite. Remember, okay, I don't need to control this. I want to try to understand this. How do I do that? Start asking questions. Another way to say this is start being curious, right? And right away, there's usually rewards. Like for me, definitely there's the reward. I start to live versus, control or fix or try to like optimize my environment. This whole idea of like optimizing life, it's a little strange to me, but anyways, maybe that I could talk about that in another episode. But either way, start to live fully. And we start to see there's so much gray area in life. And that gray area, there can be a lot of joy in that gray area, right? And then as I said in part one, we're also understanding what helps and harms. And that's also important. When we seek to understand, we can grow greater compassion in relation to harm and help or harm and benefit. I don't know, whatever words you want to use to describe that. Another tool here when we're relating to this is embodiment, what I just call embodiment practices. I already kind of mentioned I might, when I ask a question, it's not a question I'm asking the conceptual mind, like my thinking mind to figure out. It's more of a prompt. It's like a prompt to feel the body, to feel the emotion, to, like I said, be more aware of this, what my senses are perceiving in the environment around me, be aware of my thinking patterns, behaviors, actions, etc. But we can also just hone in on each one of these areas. And so one area is this more embodiment area. And so more or less, when we're applying meditation to it, it's awareness of that. It's awareness of the subtle sensations, the movement of sensations in the body, what kinds of emotions are arising. Is there tension? Is there not tension? Is there anxiety? Is there ease? And we're just, again, it's like this, it's a spiral where we're spiraling up. I don't know if you say up or down, it doesn't really matter. We're just spiraling to understand. And a big part of that understanding happens through the body, in my opinion. It happens through being aware and sitting with and being open to, sensations, emotions, etc. There are practices to specifically get good at that. On my website, you can download some guided meditations where I go into a series of embodiment practices that help me a lot to do that. If you want to skip that, I highly recommend my teacher Sognir Rinpoche, his program Fully Being, where he goes into practices called dropping and handshaking. These are probably two of the primary embodiment practices I both use myself and also teach to others that really help for growing sometimes what I call embodied wisdom, sort of intelligence or wisdom in the body that doesn't have to come from the thinking mind. And this also really helps us to open up to seeking to understand versus control, right? And then, of course, understanding sides of something, right? So we can use the thinking mind for this. So often, when I'm trying to understand what's going on in the world, which is, I don't know about for you, but for me, it's becoming increasingly challenging just because there's so much connectivity, right? Which is both a blessing and a curse because we just have so much information coming at us. And, some of us maybe don't consume that much media and some of us do. I try to hit a balance of being connected and understanding and knowing kind of what's going on in the world. And at the same time, noticing when that's triggering me and overwhelming me and sort of, backing off. I would say for me, the biggest one is when I'm using it as entertainment. That's a good sign to sort of take a break. But either way, using media to understand is becoming more increasingly difficult. And with AI, it's going to be almost virtually impossible. But either way, I don't know if we have another option. I guess we could not consume media and just meet people face to face and understand our community, which actually there's strong evidence that that's a very good way to go. So anyways, good luck with that. Let me know how it goes. Meaning like whatever you try, I'd love to hear on that. But either way, my point here is mainly understanding different sides to something. So when there's a conflict, and this could just be a conflict in our community with family or whatever, being open to seeking to understand the different sides of a conflict. If the conflict is with us, also seeking understanding of different sides. And this requires the ability to pause, to not immediately react or emotionally knee-jerk react to someone or something. So we need awareness for that. We need meditation for that. We need mindfulness for that. But it also requires sort of an interest in others, a compassion for their dissatisfaction and suffering, and love, a wish for their happiness. So these become kind of auxiliary practices. They become adjacent to this work with dropping the control and seeking to understand. But nonetheless, they're just so important. They're so vital. So these are some other things you can do. Anyways, I don't want to make too long of an episode here, but I just want to share these are probably the main things I work with around this practice of seeking to understand. There's probably a few other things I do I just can't recall right now, but I'd love to hear what you do. So if this is something you're interested in and that you've implemented and you've kind of noticed it's more, it's a more peaceful, more compassionate way to live in your life, seeking to understand versus control your world. I'd love to hear what you do, or what you've heard from other teachers or in other places. So please comment here if you're watching on YouTube. If you're listening to my podcast, I don't think there's a way to comment to the audio podcast, but you can always message me, and perhaps there's more to dig into here. So I always really appreciate your feedback. I do hear feedback from people, but it would be really nice to hear also feedback on sort of how we can continue this conversation, which I'm happy to do, because I think I'm often looking for, along with sharing on Buddhist practice and sort of meditation practice in general, I'm often looking for tools for finding a little bit more resilience in the state of affairs right now. So obviously those are going to be flavored a little bit more by the Buddhist path on this channel and on my podcast. But either way, I think I would love to hear basically what you all are working with. So thanks so much. Wishing you all the best in this journey with seeking to understand. I feel it's like one of the best journeys, to help me live life in a more compassionate way and with more ease and joy. So yeah, I hope it can be for you. Thanks so much. Take care.